Hi everyone, welcome to Single Value. So today we're going to look at diversification and why is it important, and also how much is too much and how much is not enough. So we can look at this example, and of course you can clearly use diversification in many different factors of investing or even other areas of your life. But here we're going to focus very much on stocks. How you apply it to everything else in your life is very much on you. Okay, so now we look at the whole idea of, say you have a stock portfolio and this block here just represents one stock. Now when you just have one stock, there's not much diversification going on. So you have the effect that, hey, if this stock doubles, then all of a sudden your portfolio doubles, right? And that's really nice when it happens, but we're not always going to be that lucky, and we're not always going to be that fortunate to have that situation. So we always want to counteract the whole idea of this effect, right? What if your stock doesn't double but it actually cuts in half? Then we've got that other scenario to consider, because remember, diversification is more about protecting your portfolio rather than trying to help it maximize its gains. But it can kind of have, the balance effect. You're protecting your portfolio in a very optimal way versus trying to get a decent amount of gains. You're not going to get the maximum of both, of course, but the idea is that you're going to kind of find a right number where it works for you personally, and that's what we're trying to discuss and why we're working through the whole theory of diversification. So firstly we look at one, and I don't think one is enough. Like if you're the most amazing stock picker in the world, you're going to get it wrong sometimes. Even Warren Buffett gets it wrong sometimes, right? So it's one of those inherent problems that no one can really, I guess no one really, I think everyone gets it wrong eventually. There's no one person that never gets stock wrong, because it's hard to predict these things, and hence why we go into diversification. So if we come back to the first scenario of, we have one stock, and obviously one stock isn't great, because if it halves, your portfolio halves, and it's not an ideal situation to be in. Now if we have two stocks and we say with a stock halves, then all of a sudden it's not really that bad, because you've got 75% of your portfolio left. It's still very detrimental in a sense to lose 25% of your portfolio, but you can use 75% to try to make back that other 25% you lost. And it's a lot easier than trying to make back half your portfolio, of course. Now, two stocks is, like, in a sense, it's alright. I think anyone in their right mind would minimum just, like, that's kind of like the minimum amount you would have if you wanted to hold a good diversified portfolio, even though it's not that diversified with just two. Now if we consider the effect of, if one of these stocks were to double, assuming you take a lot of risks in your investing and you invest in stocks that actually could double, then that is the case where, hey, yeah, you do have a situation where if it doubles, it can actually mean 50% addition to your portfolio. Not quite 100% when we had one stock, but 50% is still excellent, especially considering you've just reduced your risk of your portfolio by so much. When you lose something, you're not losing a lot of it, in a sense. You still lose a lot, but it's not as bad as just holding one stock. So we can start to see the idea of diversification. Now if we consider, actually, if we held three stocks and we lose 50% of one stock, all of a sudden it's actually not even, it's not as bad after that as well. So you start to begin to get the idea of, we're holding certain amount of stocks starts to make sense, where you're going to think about it as in what happens on a worst case scenario if one of these stocks were to not do well. Because we can go into a variety of situations where if one stock does well and two do bad, or if two do good and one does bad. But I think you just want to consider on the whole scenario of if one stock does incredibly bad and one stock does incredibly well, how do they impact your portfolio in different perspectives? So if we consider here 3 stocks, if one does really badly, what happens to your portfolio? The effect of it wouldn't be as bad as if you just held one stock. And if one of these stocks were to double, you would still see a really nice effect on your portfolio. So for me personally, I think 3 stocks is a really nice optimal. That is, if you're really focused on certain companies. If you research the certain companies and you know them so well that you think they're going to succeed, I think you should still have at least 3 of them. You wouldn't just focus it all on one stock. You could love Tesla and buy all Tesla. But at the end of the day, there's no guarantee Tesla does well. So you would actually want to split it into 3 different stocks, 1 being Tesla, 2 being other stocks. And that would be a really, really focused approach. But for most people who may not watch stocks like that, with that much intent and that much focus, then they're actually much better off with what I would say would be 5 stocks, assuming you're still having a focused approach. If you have a focused approach, 3 to 5 stocks is actually a good kind of range to have. Any more than that, and your time and focus starts to spread out too thinly, and you actually won't know these companies that well. You want to know the minute something happens, how the effect of on the company it has, and you can actually make a good, precise decision. But if you have too many stocks and you don't have enough time, you're not going to know. You're not going to know the minute something happens, and that's kind of what's going to define it. Especially when you have to make snap decisions on certain stocks. Now, 5 is pretty good because you've got a very good diversification. If something terribly happens to one stock, the damage isn't as bad, and you actually have 4 other stocks that could potentially just, help out, because they might all increase by a little bit, but a little bit from every one of them could make up for one big loss on one of them. So hence why you get some good protection. So hence why 3 is a good number. 5 is also pretty decent as well. So anywhere between 3 and 5. You might even say 4, because why not just take that middle number? And that, I think it just depends on you, how many companies you can find, and how many and how much money you're managing as well. Because obviously, if you have $1,000, you might not feel like it's worth it putting it into 5 different stocks for $200 each. I mean, it's still really good practice. But if you have $1,000, you probably don't want to split it too much. But if you have $100,000, that starts to become a lot of money that you might want to split on quite a few different stocks. So you can kind of see that with more money, you do want more diversification, because by losing a large amount of money, it's actually harder to come back. But if you lose, a lot of a little, if you lose $500 or $1,000, you can still make it back from, say, like a job or something. But if you have $100,000 and you lose $20,000, your job's not going to make that back too quickly, unless you get paid a lot of money, right? So we have to consider that personal circumstance of how much you're actually risking. Are you risking a lot? Because if you're risking a lot, you want more diversification. But if you're not risking too much and you kind of feel very confident about your strategy, then that's obviously a different thought as well, where you might consider, actually, I might take a bit more risk. But if you start investing a lot of money, you want to consider how much risk you're actually taking and start to pull back a bit. Now, if we were to consider the scenario of, 6, because, 6 is close to 5, so why not 6? 6 is not too bad either. I think at the end of the day, it really, really does come down to how much you're investing. The more money you invest, the more diversification you probably do want. So it just takes the risks away, and it takes the actual, kind of, it protects your portfolio, it reduces the risks, and when you're investing a lot of money, it also means making small gains is actually still quite a lot of money. Because if you invest $1 million and you make 10%, that's $100,000. That's good money. But if you're investing, $1,000 and you make 10%, that's $100. $100, it's, not too bad for investing $1,000, right? But $100 might not be as meaningful to you, and you might actually think, if I invest $1,000, I at least want $200 to $300 in return, which would be 20 to 30%. So you might have different goals based on the different amounts that you actually invest, and that's how you want to think about it. Hence why you want to consider diversification based on your own circumstance and the risk that you can take. Because if you invest $1,000 and you lose $500, you might not have a job, and you can't earn that $500 back. So hence why you might want to take a bit more, reduce the risk you take. But if you go, I have $1,000 and I lose $500, how much effect does it have on you? And hence why, you look at this and you go, 3 to 5 stocks is generally pretty good for most people. 3 to 5 is usually pretty good for most people. If you're investing extremely large amounts, of course you want to start to diversify into more and more stocks, but I probably wouldn't go any further than, for me personally, I wouldn't go more further than 10. If you go further than 10, I doubt you have that much time to spread along all those stocks to know exactly what's happening in the industry, with the company, and everything else. But of course, that's just my opinion, of course. You personally let me know, how many stocks do you guys hold? What is a good number for you guys when you invest, that you feel is a good diversification, right? Because obviously if you hold 20 or even 30 stocks, I doubt you know them all. You look at hedge funds, and yes, they hold a lot of stocks, but they also have a large amount of money that they invest, and they also have a large amount of personnel investigating these stocks. And hence, even though they might hold a lot of stocks, they know them very well because they're split among different people. But if you're an individual investor, then that's very, very much a different case, and you have to manage your own scenario, to do with you, rather than following what other people will do, because their situation could be very, very different from yours. And that's kind of the considerations that I want you to consider, particularly when it comes to managing your own stock portfolio. Feel free to let me know what your thoughts are, and I hope you enjoyed that, because I think I want to just focus a bit more on education as well, because I can talk about stocks, but if I don't, talk about education, I think that might not necessarily be the best as well, because obviously if you buy a lot of risky stocks and you don't have the right diversification or risk approach, that can also be quite detrimental to your portfolio. And I just want you to know, that if you buy into a risky stock, that you're not necessarily risking everything into the stock. But even if you are, I want you to understand, how you could actually change your situation to actually better your circumstances, of course. If you have any questions or anything that I didn't cover, feel free to comment below. Until then, good luck investing, everyone.